You ready?
Yes.
I am so toasty in this thing. I'm going to be taking this off and on, taking it off and putting it on,
Off and on.
the whole time. Whatever.
Okay.
Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing lightworkers get together every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can live as your true self and follow your true north. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby. Hello.
You know what?
What?
Hi. After last, if someone says hello to me, I feel obligated to say hi back. Like it's rude to ignore it. We were talking about how your true north is inward towards yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to float this idea by you that instead of live as your true self and follow your true north, it's follow your true north back to your true self.
Oh, I like that a lot.
Right?
Yeah.
Wholeness and healing for body and mind so you can follow your true north back to your true self.
Yes.
You might do that.
It's a good change. It's a good update. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Kind of a little bit closer to the target.
We've evolved our wording. Yeah, exactly. It is. It is.
What do you got today?
What have I got today? Well, I figured we were going into round 3 of Speaking Your Truth.
Yes.
I thought there might be some things that you wanted to say about
Well,
that.
the first thing I wanted to say is nothing.
Okay.
We went into last episode with you saying, I want to speak my truth. And then my response was to start talking. So I'm going to do a take 2 while I sit uncomfortably in the fact that I'm both hot and cold. And I don't know how that's possible, but here we are.
Here we are. Well, I don't even know where to start with that, because partially in my mind, like, I've moved through it, so I'm now like moving forward. But other than to say, if you go back and you look on our Instagram, you can see the partial text between Ryan and I where, yes, in the last episode, part 2 of Speaking Your Truth, you will find that I do say that I want to speak my truth, and then you take off with all the things that you have to tell me. And someone pointed that out to you. And the thing is like, I don't know if I said this to you in our communication, but I was very aware that that's what was happening. I was very aware that I wasn't doing any of the speaking, but you were doing all of the talking. And this is where, like, when I go back and reflect on that episode, part of me can say, okay, Abby, this is you not speaking your truth. You had something to say and you just allowed somebody else to take your voice. Like, you gave permission to not speak your truth. And so I can say that. I can easily say that. But, and then of course, Figment, my lizard, can name a whole bunch of evidence, like why that makes me the wrong person to be talking on this subject and everything. And, but regardless, like, I just kept coming back to, I was very aware of it happening in the moment. And at that point in time, I had a choice to make. And so using discernment, I decided to let you just keep going with what you had to say. And so while from an outside perspective, like someone else telling you that that's what happened, I want you to hear from my perspective why I chose to let that happen. As your friend and knowing you, how many years have we known each other?
So many years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Once it gets past a decade, I stop counting.
And we were well past a decade. And especially even more so now, I feel like I know and understand you better, to the point where sometimes when you're in the process of learning something, you use a lot of words, and you have to use a lot of words to make a lot of connections. I know this about you. Like, sometimes when you're on an idea, you just talking about it and kind of going off on these rabbit holes and different things and coming back, like you processing it verbally out loud, helps you make your connections. And so in that moment, I realized that in order for you to understand what had happened in our offline call, you needed to keep going. you needed to keep saying that out loud. So I chose to kind of step back for just a second and let you make those connections, because as your friend, I value your growth as well. Does that make sense?
I want to say that makes a lot of sense, but we've already flagged that as my I wasn't listening. So I'm trying to find another way to say yes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. So go ahead.
No.
Is that what this episode is going to be? I'm going to be filling in all the blanks. Do you... you had a question?
I have a few, but... I want to know what yours was first.
Well, what I was going to say is, after you said all that you said, I felt like the thing that I needed to speak out loud, you already said. So there was you already got it. You already heard me without me even saying anything, because you were just verbally processing it. So everything you said is what I wanted to sort of get off my chest, even though what you were saying also helped me clear up the confusion as to why we were on two different pages in the first place, which, so once you cleared that up, then sort of what I had to say just naturally dissipated. I didn't need to add to that. I felt like, okay, we've gotten something out of this. You made some connections for yourself that will affect me for the better. And so here we go. Let's move on.
How did it feel to come to the podcast with something to say and then to hear someone else say it? Like, was there an element to you where... Did it matter to you that you weren't the one who spoke it?
Well, sure. My initial, lizard brain ego reaction is, he's not even going to let me say it. I have something to say and I can't even say it. And I can't even interrupt him because he just keeps going. Yes, that is, of course, that's my ego mind. So naturally, that was my first thought. But then, this is where my practice makes progress comes into play, where I've practiced recognizing that those are red flags for me. And if I go to that place and that's this judgment or even a projection on you, then that means I need to take a look at myself. And is that really true? And then just step back, come back to my business and see what it is what is really happening in that particular moment. So then I very quickly moved into, I'm really hearing what he's saying. And ultimately it's covering a lot of the things that I wanted to say in the first place. And I don't want to interrupt this as your friend. And truly, I value your growth. That to me is what friendship is all about, is holding the other person accountable to be their highest self. And so I feel very strongly in supporting you in doing that. And so in that moment, that's what I moved into. I didn't want to interrupt that process, because I do feel like, now knowing you, that's the way that you sort of make your connections. So I guess, sorry, the answer to your question would be, I suppose it depends. But for you, having you answer the question, it was more important than me answering the question in that moment. That may not always be the case, but in that moment.
I wasn't aware that was what was happening. I was totally, and I can tell you why. And I don't think I would have been aware had someone not made me aware. We had the conversation on Thursday. Friday morning, I get a polo from a friend who says, "Hey, I'm 7 minutes in. I already have feedback," and he was like, "You're not gonna like it." And he called that out, and then continued to say, "It's my perception." This is from his perspective. He said, "I tell myself a story that you." Abby said she had some words for you and you got scared, and your way of defending yourself was to beat her to the punch and just start talking. Had he not said that, and then the slew of other people over the next hour also just pinging me saying, "Hey, way to listen to someone telling you that they need to tell you their truth and then start talking." I wouldn't have been aware. I would not have been aware had I not been called out. And the first person that called it out was precisely right. I going back and listening, it was a defensive maneuver on my part. And that goes back to a lot of things that we've talked about, but it's almost like I don't want to say softens the blow, because I don't think you were coming at me for like with a blow to soften. But if I can beat someone to the punch and say what I think they're going to say before they say it, then I don't have to hear it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's just defensiveness 101, right? And the first thing I do when I'm in defensive territory is to shut off my inner observer, because if he's there watching, then he'll call me out. You know, and I think that's why I just had I can't say I didn't know, but I wasn't aware. Does that make sense? Like, yes, you always know what you're doing, but I had turned off the part of me that taps me on the shoulder and says, hey, let's review what just happened, you know?
So I have a question about that, because I was aware of it. You were not aware of it. I went back and forth after the episode as to whether or not I would make you aware of it. And then I got your text saying someone else did. I was like, oh, this is funny. So in people making you aware of what happened, like what was your reaction? And the reason why I want to know is because what if nobody made you aware? Even me. What if I didn't ever say anything?
Well, my reaction was not defensive. When people, I'm really good at taking that kind of feedback and that kind of critique. Like if someone points something out, my first instinct is to just assume that they're right.
Everyone, or your trusted people?
People that I trust.
Okay.
Yes. And I guess I'm just in a place in my life where the only people who offer me critique are people that I trust. Or maybe I don't count it. I just don't hear it when it's someone I don't trust, because they don't count. I don't know. But then I go look at the facts and say, is this backed up? And is this like a real thing, or is this just their perception? And then oftentimes part of the reason why I've come to trust the people I've come to trust is because it's based in objective stuff and not just their opinion. And also when you get like that many calls and texts and polos in that short of a time, the consensus, I mean, it's hard to ignore. But if no one had told me, I don't know that I'd be aware of it. I go back and I listen to the show the same day that we record so that I can put time codes on the show notes. And even going back and listening to it, I didn't hear it. And so one of the things that I noticed that you said earlier in this recording was that you noticed it, but your first inclination was to go back into your business and not call it out. And so I wonder if there's room for you to have called me out on it. Not saying you should have, but what if nobody else did? If nobody else had called me on it and you were the only person who noticed that was going on, but you decided to stay in your business, I wouldn't have had that growth opportunity.
Well, and this is why I kept going back and forth, because my business, I would have felt like I was devaluing myself.
For you to have called me out?
No, to have not called you out, to have not called you out, but to stand up for me, to circle back and say, but wait, I still have something to say. Like, thank you for saying that. I'm glad you said that, but I still have something to say. I didn't even do that. You know, once we got through what you had to say, we sort of shifted out of the conversation. In that moment, I'm sure I did it because I felt like that's what we needed to say. And I don't know that I had anything else to contribute, you know, without repeating what you said. So, but like looking back on it, I have evidence and old trauma where I can easily shame myself into saying, there you go again. You just let one more person just walk all over you and you didn't stand up for yourself. Like I can easily say that's what happened in that episode. Even though you were vulnerable enough to say in the beginning, you had something to say. And So, I mean, it does, like, that's my business, but that's very different than calling you out. That's your business. Like, the way I would have handled that conversation is I would have just brought it back to my experience and my experience of not being able to say that, and maybe give you some of the reasons why I didn't, but that it bothered me or triggered me. And so I'm circling back to let you know, this is what happened for me during that conversation. But I asked you, if you, okay, well, now you are aware of it. Enough people told you. So what do you take away from it? Like, now that you know because it sounds like you've been doing some reflection on it. You've been doing some journaling. Like, what are you getting out of it?
Well, it just reminds me how much more work I still have to do in terms of actually holding space for people to use their voice, which means not using mine as much. And even when I think I'm doing well, it's now evident to me that I still need to check to make sure I'm doing well at that. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that really bothers me when I find out that I thought I was doing something with a certain degree of skill or aptitude or whatever, only to find out that I wasn't, like, retroactively. Like, if I think I'm knocking a school assignment out of the park and then I get a really bad grade, that's a little bit of a rug yank, So when I go into a conversation thinking that I'm doing a good job of listening and holding space for somebody, and then I turn around and find out, oh, wait, you really weren't. That's a really hard thing for me to grapple with. And so then I know that when something's really hard for me to grapple with, that's because there's something really deep in there that it's digging up. Because otherwise it would be just easy. You take the learning and then you go and do better. Why is it so hard for me to deal with it? So I've been kind of digging into the why. And I don't really know that I have an answer yet. But it is... I don't know. I mean, what it's done for me in the immediate present is it's caused me to build in a layer of scrutiny before just saying words. It's almost like a Band-Aid. I don't know if that's like a sustainable practice for someone who's wired the way I'm wired. But
and how are you wired?
To talk.
What do you mean by
that? I mean, like I'm a verbal processor. I talking is home to me, being verbose. And so it feels a little bit like a reactive pendulum swing, just to be like, okay, I'm going to talk less from now on. That doesn't, doesn't feel like
it's
something
not really
that will
who
just
you are.
Last. Right. But now it matters more to me that I actually not just listen, but hold space for someone to even talk in the first place. And it matters to me more than it did before before I open my mouth and just start filling space, to ask myself if what I'm about to fill it with is worth everyone's time.
So why does it matter more now for both of those things?
It doesn't feel great to be a podcaster doing a series on using your voice, and then in the middle of that be an example of some less than best ways to go about doing that. I think in the last couple of episodes, some shadow work that still needs to be done has been unearthed and brought to bear. I don't know.
So is it just because you're a podcaster? Like, what if this conversation would have happened offline? would it still matter more now?
I don't know. Because part of us being a podcaster means people are listening and people can give us feedback. And a lot of the feedback and conversations I've had from that feedback is what kind of led me to kind of getting to a place where it's more important to me. Or maybe I just realized how important it always was to pay attention to the words I use and to hold at least as much space, if not more, for other people to use their words as well. Mm-hmm. And if we hadn't been doing this in public, then a lot of the other side conversations I've been having all week with a lot of people wouldn't have been had to kind of give me that perspective, and kind of reframe my attitude to one that treats this whole topic as something that's a little bit more important. Like I just feel like the stakes are higher than I've been acting like they have been, not just on this, but in all the things. Mm. But it took me kind of going in front of the whole internet and saying we're going to talk about how to use your voice, and then seeing what happened. You know, like it just, I don't know that the stakes aren't as high in interpersonal, behind the scenes conversations, and those platforms don't lend themselves to these things turning into, multifaceted group conversations that help me work this stuff out. Is that answering your question at all?
The second part, I agree with you, where if it's an offline conversation, it's not going to be a catalyst for these other meaningful conversations. However, I think the stakes are just as high when you're talking about the conversation being with someone that's in your tribe. Because here's what I'm hearing you say. Figment is hearing you say that if that would have happened offline, I would not have mattered as much to you. Like it wouldn't have mattered as much to you for that to happen to me. So it had to happen. Like I'm hearing you say, Figment is hearing you say that because it happened live, we're worried about all these other people. So that meant more that you circled back. Well, does that make sense?
Let me ask you this. Did you have any intention to tell me after last week's recording?
Well, I was going back and forth on it. I was in that process of trying to figure out what I still needed to say that you didn't say, that maybe something else I needed to get out, but then also point that out too, because, well, I'll come back to that. So I was in that process, and it takes me a long time, because I haven't practiced it enough where it's just quick, and sure. It's, I'm very careful with my words. I don't want what I say to be misinterpreted. So I think through exactly how I'm going to say it, how I want it to come across, in the hopes that I've said it clear enough that you will understand or hear what I need to say. Not agree necessarily, just that you understand the scope of what I'm trying to say. And then what happened is somebody beat me to it. So I like the decision to tell you or not tell you was sort of just lost now because somebody else already did. So I don't know where I would have ended up, but if I kind of rely on the work that I'm trying to do and the evidence that I have to support that, I believe I would have come to a decision to tell you. And, but it might have been more from the male-female dynamic too.
Well, that's something that one of the people that in our tribe even brought up too. Mm-hmm. Well, the reason I ask that is because I want to address if it happened not in public, that it wouldn't have mattered as much. Where I am is I don't know that. Well, until you said that just now, I wasn't sure that you would have ever brought it to my attention. Mm. And so if that were the case and it wasn't public, you're the only person who would be able to.
Right.
And if you didn't, then I wasn't going to get there on my own.
Mm-hmm.
So then nothing would have happened other than you said you were going to say something and then I steamrolled you and then that was it. Right? And so because this happened publicly, because I got that feedback turned into conversations, and having those conversations is what pulled me into a place where I don't know if it matters more, but at least I'm behaving as though it matters more. So it's more of a cause and effect pathway of how I arrived where I am. And this being a public conversation was the thing that catalyzed a chain of events that led me to a place where now I'm choosing to behave as though it matters as much as it does. Does that make sense? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with how much you matter.
Yes, no, it does make sense, and I hear you. I'm listening. Yes, right. Because I mean, if it happened offline, I am the only one that
Right.
can tell you. And here's the thing: like, I have just as much growing in this as you do. I mean, I also am aware that I didn't speak up in that conversation and tell you, hey, wait, I still have something to say. I mean, that's, I'm still grappling with that and why I chose to let that happen. And I can't fully place it on the fact that, yes, I value your growth, so I let it happen, because I still have to be accountable to me. I also value my own growth. And so, that's sort of what I'm figuring out through this process too, is this is probably one of my weakest links, is speaking up, speaking my truth. And this is the ultimate platform. This is the very reason why I wanted to go out on a whim and start this podcast in the first place. So I get frustrated with myself when I don't do it.
Right. I don't know about I still tell myself the story that I need to have something fully figured out before putting myself in a position to speak publicly about it. Because whether or not I paint myself as an authority on a topic, if I go into a podcast and I talk about it, it's kind of implied. Like if somebody takes a stage to sing a song, you're going to assume that they believe that they're good enough of a singer to even do that. And so that's why when somebody like gets on a stage and sings badly, it's like, well, either you don't realize that you're bad or you don't care about, And so when I'm public doing this, I still tell myself a story that if I'm going to try to cover this topic and there are people who listen who like are coming at it to try to, I don't know, learn something, then that makes me feel some type of way about the fact that all I'm really doing is demonstrating how much I still have left to learn on this topic.
But here's the deal. I got asked this question yesterday. Does it make me a hypocrite if I talk on this topic and I'm not an expert myself? And it was on this very thing about self-care, about self-compassion. And my answer to that is, I think it makes you the best teacher. I think us not being in that place makes us a good teacher, because yes, you may be trying, and yes, you may not have mastered this yet, but then you are able to speak on the triumphs, the failures. You're able to speak on the process. You know exactly what people are feeling. We know exactly what it looks like. It's like the whole thing going back to the woman on Facebook that sort of triggered my value as a life coach, that life coaches typically don't have their shit together. And I've always said, you want a life coach that doesn't have their shit together, because then that means that they're also living it. So they're understanding it. They're going through it. They just happen to have the tools and the resources and the expertise to figure out how to do that. But you want them on that journey with you. Maybe a few steps ahead. Maybe they're on the other side of it. But at some point, they've gone through it. And so I feel like, somebody was asking us the other day how we've been growing our podcast, and my answer simply was, we just show up and be ourselves. Because I think the fact that we're going through it and we're not on this soapbox and self-righteously saying, this is how you handle this, and we know all about it, and quote unquote, being the experts that know everything, I think that turns off a lot of people. I think people are past the point where I don't want to bullshit my way through thinking I know something when I'm still doing it myself. And I think that we're growing, and I think that's resonating with people because it's refreshing to actually hear somebody say, this is what I've learned, this is what I know, but that doesn't mean that I'm always capable of doing it myself. Like, I'm still in the growing process, but here's what I've learned from it. Here's how it can help. So I don't agree with your story.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask you this. I'm going to put you on the spot. Mm-hmm. What would you say is the one most prominent learning or growth opportunity that this series on speaking your truth has presented to you?
Oh, geez. Yeah, you put me on the spot. Because this is deeply layered, and we've only scratched like one side of it. We haven't even talked about using your voice in conversations around politics and religion, and I would have to say, oh geez, I think if I had to sum it all up, I think I'd come back to you. It comes down to trusting yourself. That speaking your truth is really about trusting yourself. It's knowing yourself. It's trusting that you are not alone. Like, no person is an island. I think I said this in our True North Tip Tuesday. No person is an island. There's someone else out there that aligns with your thinking. And so trusting that, and trusting that what you have to say and what you feel and what you believe in is worthy and is valuable to you should be enough. It is enough. And the good news is there's somebody else out there that's going to align with that. And hopefully then those people become your tribe. But I think it first starts with that piece of trusting yourself. And I mean, I think I probably even need to break that down a little bit more and clarify to say that it's not trusting your ego. It's not trusting your lizard. It truly is trusting your essential self, that really who you are at your core matters and is worthy of being said. It's worthy of being expressed in whatever way that looks like in that moment. Yeah. So that's a good question. I'm going to throw that one back on you. The biggest takeaway from this conversation.
I don't know why I didn't expect this. I think for me, it's been a matter of courage. To I mean, for me to not just start talking takes courage. Because when I'm using words and making noise, that feels safe to me. For a lot of different reasons. And so, weirdly, to just be quiet feels vulnerable and exposed, and like I'm not in control. And then also just the courage to disagree with you on something that we both care a lot about.
Mm-hmm.
I think I spent a lot of last episode trying to put into my words what I thought your philosophy was on how and when to mind your words, and trying to be diplomatic about it and find some middle ground where we can both agree. And for me, that partially just came from a lack of courage, because I really just spent the whole time wanting to say that I will always want to pay attention to my words, whether I'm in ego or in soul, whether I'm in love and light or not. It's always going to matter to me that in this moment that I pay attention to my words, how they might be received, what they what the ramifications, positive or negative, might be. I can't paint a scenario where that's not something I feel like is in the highest good of myself and whoever I'm talking to. Even if I am in love and light, I'm still of the opinion that it's better for me to process the potential positive and negative consequences of the words I use. And I didn't feel like I didn't have the courage to just come out and say that last episode. And so, I mean, yeah, it's just have the courage to sit in silence, have the courage to let somebody else take the floor, have the courage to speak my interiors. Yeah, a lot of the times when I just feel space like I am right now, it's just fear. It's just, if I'm feeling the space, then other people can't.
Does it mean nothing's happening to you? Like if you're filling the space, you're not being triggered, you're not being hurt, you're not...
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with whether or not I feel safe, because I feel really safe with you. I don't feel like you're gonna attack me for disagreeing with you. I don't have any fears around anything that you might do, and so it's not a you thing. It's a 5-year-old me thing, a 7-year-old me thing. You know, which just means I just need to work harder to reparent that kid, so that he doesn't feel like something bad's gonna happen to him.
Mm-hmm. Courage. Yeah. So I'm going to circle back though, because I made a connection when you were talking about having the courage to say that you disagreed with me, that you're always going to pay attention to your words. I realized the side of the conversation that I didn't really shed light on, which is that I do agree with you that even if you're speaking your mind and you're sitting in your ego, it is also important to pay attention to your words. Like I do agree with you on that point, because words can hurt and words can cut very deeply. And so when you are speaking from a place of ego, you have the ability to affect someone in a very traumatic way. So I guess the bridge then between where you and I sit on that would be, then I'm asking that you consciously be mindful of whether or not you're in ego or you're in soul when you're speaking.
Yes. I also still think that even if you're operating in love and light and you're in soul, you can still say words that can have deleterious effects on people. I just do. I mean, the best thing you have is your intention, right? Like, if your intentions are in the right place, that's the best place to be. But I've even had the best intentions and still said things that ended up hurting somebody.
So this brings me to one of the most beautiful lessons that I've learned. And it's on repair. So it's been years. I don't even know where I got this information. Long before I had kids, but it was a parenting example. And it was, sometimes you can blow up. You might lose your temper, be angry at your kid, just say things that you don't want to say. You might shame them, whatever the case may be. But what you do with that afterwards is more important than what happened in that moment. You can go back and repair that if it's done. Now, we're not talking years down the road. It's already done its work at that point. But if you kind of lose your temper in a moment, you can come back that evening, you can come back the next morning, the next day, and you can repair that and actually rewrite through the amazing neuroplasticity of our brain, rewrite that story and repair that trauma. And so then what they were saying with that is like, so if you end up in an argument with your spouse and your kids are watching that, it is more important that they see you apologize or come to a resolution with your spouse than the actual fight. Like, it's more damaging not to see them, for them to see that repair. And so bringing that to the table with this conversation is, even if you're in love and light, and maybe this is what I was intending to say, but maybe just wasn't clear on, is when you're in love and light, yes, we can never guarantee that what we're saying, even with the best intention, isn't going to trigger somebody else. The other person would have to be enlightened, where they literally expect no outcomes. They're not attached to anything. They're not triggered. How many people do you talk to are really enlightened, right?
Zero.
So there is no guarantee. But speaking your truth is then followed up with the repair. Like, when you're in love and light, repair is so necessary, and it's sticking with that, where acknowledging, I realize I've triggered you. Like, let's talk about that. What does that mean? Asking questions, getting curious, and having that conversation, repairing so that you understand maybe why they got defensive or acted the way they did, and then you can more clearly state what your intention was in the first place. So, yes, I agree with you on that point. But then in having done that, it has changed the nature of many of my relationships, including the one with my son. I am a product of one of my parents, well, both of my parents, but one that happens to blow up, and I never got the repair. And that's been the most damaging part of my childhood. But I also have some of those genetics, so I've lost my temper with my child. But I've always come back and repaired. And I think that has actually made us stronger. And I was able to, in fact, rewrite the damage that I did when I lost it.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we ever got that far in our using your voice discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's one of the, it felt like an epiphany, but I think I overused that word. I had a realization over the past week that whenever somebody has a limiting belief or some kind of self-doubt, my go-to, and I've said this to you before too, is who put those words there, right?
Right.
Those are somebody else's words.
Yep.
And then it occurred to me that is a consequence of the fact that those people chose those words. So whoever put those words in your head chose to put words in your head that would cause you to doubt yourself. They could have chosen to put words in your head that you could use when you doubt yourself to start believing in yourself. But they chose those words. They didn't have any control over the fact that they got stuck in your head, or the fact that you grew up echoing them back to yourself and causing self-doubt and limiting beliefs. But at some point in time, somebody put those words in your head and they stuck. And I am cognizant of the fact that with my son and my godkids, I'm putting words in their head. I don't know which ones are going to stick, which ones are going to disappear, which ones are going to bounce around in their heads until they're in their 30s. But I get to choose whether they're the ones that cause self-doubt or the ones that cause self-empowerment. And one of my godkids is just extremely sensitive. And and just it's not hard for the kid to be brought to tears over the smallest amount of physical pain or discomfort, right? And I was the same way as a kid, so part of that's triggering for me because I'm still working on inviting that part home because I've spent so much of my life rejecting that part of myself and calling him a crybaby and all that stuff. And I sat down with this kid and I said, okay, if you cry about everything, people are going to stop believing that you're actually experiencing trauma. That's the whole boy who cried wolf thing, right? So 3 minutes from now, I know you're going to be up and running around and laughing. So save your tears for the things that really, 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 really need to get cried about, because crying is communication. And so I thought I was like my intentions were in the right place. I thought I was kind of helping him to coach him on don't cry, don't be a crybaby, none of that. Just like, hey, this is a tool that our bodies use to communicate things, and if you overuse it, it's going to get devalued and it won't get heard when you break an arm or something, right? And so we had that little moment, and he was like, okay. And then the next time I saw him actually get hurt, and I was the only adult around, and he looked at me, and he was like holding him in. And I asked, I was like, what? Like, what's... I would have cried, right? And he just looked at me and said, but you told me I can't cry. Mm. And so, out of everything that I said, all the words I gave him, that's what he got out of it. Mm-hmm. And so then I thought, okay, well, maybe he's just not old enough to understand yet the concept that I was trying to introduce. And maybe he's at a point in his development where it would have been better for me to have just addressed how he felt in that moment. And in both of those scenarios, I would have counted myself as being in love and light. In both those scenarios, I would have counted myself as having the best intentions. But yet there's one choice of words that I used that planted "don't cry" in his head. And there's another choice of words I could have used that probably would have planted, I mean, there's no way to know for sure, but that may have planted something more positive or empowering or safe or whatever, constructive in his head instead. And so that's kind of what really helped me solidify the importance of not being mindful of the consequences of my words, because I can't see into the future to see what they are, but at least considering the potential consequences, both positive and negative. And whenever I interface with somebody, kind of just ask myself, if these words bounce around in their head, what story about themselves do I want these words to contribute to?
Mm-hmm. I think, well, yeah, there's just one thing in there that you said that I really want to fine tune. When somebody else is giving you the words, and I'm speaking from my own experience here, is I got a lot of traumatic words as a kid, but those really weren't the words that stuck. It wasn't those words that kept repeating, but it was the connections that I made about myself based on what they were saying. And because I didn't have the repair, I didn't have the adult coming back and saying, do you understand why I said this? Let's talk about this. Do you know what I mean? You know, and like, how do you feel about that? in that repair process. So I just made the connections myself with, my 10-year-old brain, who that's the only experience that I had at the time. My brain had
Right.
nothing else to connect the dots. So I created my own words, which were not true because I read between the lines of what somebody else said. And then you just gave the perfect example of that, where even though your words that you chose were coming from a place of love and light, that child still made up their own story. They connected the dots in their own head, not to cry. And we don't know ever if that's going to happen. I mean, had you not had the experience of like seeing them hold back the tears, you wouldn't have known how that story landed with them, right? So it's tricky, especially when it comes to kids, because that's of course when they're wiring everything that we say. So you do have to be a bit more mindful,
Right.
with kiddos, but anyway.
Well, you're right that we can't ever know, but we can make increasingly good guesses as we get more information about them, right? And now that I've had this experience with him, now I know, again, I can't know the next selection of my words, what that's going to do to him, but I have a better idea, and it's just like we're very accustomed to, like, the weather person says it's going to be one thing one day, so you make a plan, then that day comes and it's different. How long have we been studying the weather? How much education did they have to get to be able to do that?
Right.
And still it's just their best guess. But knowing that they'll never know for sure doesn't stop them from still trying to make the best guess they can. And so I don't take responsibility for the fact that he ended up with that story, because that is his brain that took my words and turned into something other than what they were. But I do take responsibility moving forward, not in that instance because it's already happened, but moving forward to be mindful that there's a good chance he may take this huge collection of words that I could select from and just distill it down to don't cry. And so then for me to be in love and light with him is to incorporate those things and to be mindful of those, so that when I do choose words with him in the future, I'm increasing the odds that if the words stick, they'll be positive words. Not ensuring, because you can't control it, but you can increase the odds based on what you know.
I want to point out too that what you said is exactly what we've been saying all along about getting curious. Because what you're saying is you are knowing somebody on a level where you meet them where they are, and you're not changing your nature or how you speak because of them, because you're still in love and light, but you now have evidence. You now have enough knowing and understanding how to continue to approach them in love and light that still meets them where they are. And that's sort of what we have been saying all along, is that curiosity piece where we're talking about asking questions. What we're really saying is what you just said, is knowing somebody, getting to know somebody so well. And that's what happened for me on the last episode, is where I feel like knowing you well enough that you're a verbal processor, I chose to let you process that. And so maybe that changed the way that I showed up, but I was still operating in love and light, right? And I think, honestly, I feel like this is the antidote to so much of what's going on in the world, is we just choose not to understand people that we disagree with, that differ from us. Like we don't get to know anyone anymore.
Right.
And how much would change? How would we start to balance out this polarization we had if we just stopped to get to know the person on the other side? Just to understand, not to agree, but just to kind of understand, have a knowing, so we know how to show up. and meet them where they are.
And look for the good when you do. Like, I was driving, I dropped my son off at daycare, and I passed by this house. It was kind of a rural-ish, like one of those places where the road's a little bit higher than the houses and there's no sidewalk. You just kind of like go down this slanted gravel driveway, and then you're in their front yard. And there was fire in the front yard. I saw the smoke, and when I got closer, I saw some flames on the grass. And as I passed by it, I was like, no, I need to make sure their house isn't going to burn down. So I pull a U-turn on this narrow, weird, like 2-lane, 2-way road, and came back. And by the time I got into the person's driveway, he was already coming out of the house. And he was like, you're the third person to show up. Make sure my house isn't burned down. It's fine. I'm just clearing the brush on the fence line. I'm a country boy. We just burn shit up sometimes.
That's how we do
it's
it.
Good. Yeah. But then he like fist bumped me. He's like, you know what? Good on you though, because most people drive by and don't stop, and there needs to be more people like you. And I was just like, so we had this great little connection. And then he mentioned something about the storming of the Capitol on Inauguration Day. And we had this good little rapport, but he said what he said. My face just dropped, and I like hesitated, and then my body reaction cued him into the fact that we were on very different sides of the fence here. And there was like tensions rose really quickly. Like it was almost like this realization that like, oh, we're not on the same team.
We can't be friends anymore.
Right. But then I kind of thought about how ridiculous that was. Like all of a sudden, what was a great human to human connection. I need to make sure your house isn't going to burn down. Hey, I have gratitude for you stopping and checking on me. Right. We don't know each other, but there was this moment. And then all of a sudden you say some words, and now we're going to get in a fight, you know? So I thought about how funny that was. And I kind of grinned, and then he kind of like his shoulders slumped. Like there was tension in his body that just kind of like dropped, and then he started laughing, and then I started laughing, and it was like this little like, it was just such a great little moment. Before we got to the part that would divide us, we first made a connection that connected us. And that connecting moment was enough to diffuse and minimize, not eliminate, the thing that would divide us. But we both kind of were able to sit in the reality that there's more to the human experience than this one thing. And again, we didn't have a conversation. We didn't swap numbers. We didn't condone, or condemn. We just were like, okay, we're both humans. That's a thing that we're going to lean into right now. And I learned about him, and he learned about me. And if we ever cross paths in a different setting, it may be a different conversation. But there's also that human to human goodness and gratitude foundation undergirding that thing now.
Here's the cool thing about that is you found it before you found the divide.
Right.
The humanity in each other. And so that speaks a lot to what labels do in our brains. That as soon as you place a label on somebody, and we've talked about labels before, all of a sudden that categorizes them into being a certain type of person. All of a sudden, because they're this, they are this person. And the crazy thing is if you take off that filter, there is a human under there. There is a place for you to connect. And this is the cool example of you actually found that connection first before that, filter was put in place. But then because of that filter, like because you found that connection already, I love that you were able to not get defensive about it and just go on your ways and have an experience with somebody that was the right thing to do, And
here's why that's a victory for me is once I figured out his standing on that particular issue, I went immediately into being defensive. And my response to being defensive is to talk a lot. And so I wanted to ask a clarifying question because it was kind of vague and just let me feel out exactly where you're at because I have some thoughts, right? And my knee-jerk reaction was to just go into for me, it's not fight or flight, it's fight. I just have fight mode. There's no flight here. And so back to what I was saying earlier, it took courage to be quiet. It took courage to hold space in case he wanted to say more words, or to not have to assert myself.
Mm-hmm.
And it was after the silence that I found the smile, and
Mm-hmm.
it felt kind of like a new skill to be able to have words and then show restraint and just not fucking say them for 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows where it would have gone if I had just said the thing that came to my head. And
Right.
again, I live in a culture that tells me that everyone wants to hear my words. Like, I'm told that my words are more valuable. I'm told that if there's space, I should take it up.
Mm.
Just because I'm a man, just because I'm white, that's just what our culture says I should do. That's where I belong,
Mm.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to like just shut my trap for a second is kind of, it's nice. It's freeing. It's weirdly empowering, because for me in my situation, what that says is I'm choosing not to read from the script I was given.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Which means you also trusted yourself. You had to trust yourself to have that courage to just let the conversation be what it was going to be. Because at the end of the day, what did it really matter? You don't know this person. You're probably
Right.
not going to change his viewpoint. The point is you did a neighborly, friendly, human to human thing. That's enough.
Right. And now what we walk away from is, I know that there's someone in that camp who goes straight to gratitude, and he knows there's someone in that camp who will stop and make sure his house isn't burning down.
Exactly.
Anyway, I thought that was cool.
Yeah, it is.
How are you feeling? I want to check in. This has been the tone of this episode has been unlike any. This is episode 51, and it is unlike the previous 50 in so many ways.
So tell me, what is the tone? What are you reading it as?
I think if I go back and look at the waveforms when I edit this, I'm going to see a lot more space.
Yes.
And I'm going to see
definitely.
a lot less me. And I'm going to see that the waveforms they don't peak as highly. We didn't get like loud and rambunctious and, you know, I don't know.
Yes.
There's been a different tone. It's not a bad thing.
Quiet. Even the vibration of our voices is lower. It's been quiet and low this whole time. Check in. I feel like we finally got everything out. I feel like part 3 done. We're done. We're done for a while.
You do? Because the last, like, you sent me that Vox where you were like, I don't feel like I'm being heard. And I'm like, well, damn it. If there's one thing that happens in this episode, it's that Abby's going to feel like everything that she had in there that needed to get heard got heard.
The only, I mean, we could go back but this is, I don't know, it might be speaking your truth, but yeah, there is some validity to feeling like, there has been a shift where you have spoken a lot more in the last few weeks, but I also feel like I've been going through a lot of stuff in the last few weeks. So there has been this sort of unwritten idea between us that you would cover me, right? So I don't know. I think it's out there. But if that changes, I'm going to tell you.
I am grateful for that. And I'm also going to
What
check
else
to
are you
make sure that
grateful for?
my thing is still recording, because the numbers stopped counting. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Okay. That's fine. It is recording. It's just not telling me it's recording. That's just great. Adobe, you need to get your shit together. What did you ask me?
What else are you grateful for?
Oh. I am grateful. I'm grateful for my bidet.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Okay.
No. This isn't just from like a need to like add some levity into what was an otherwise heavy conversation. Like, I was thinking about this today while using it. When the toilet paper thing happened, my first response was to get a bidet. To just like take myself out of that whole equation, like reduce my toilet paper need so that a shortage wouldn't really affect me as much, right? And just having that bidet has led to so many unforgettable experiences. Like, Everyone remembers their first time.
Oh, yes.
Using a bidet.
Yes, they do.
I remember my son walking in there and not knowing what it was, and of course he would flip dials and like just shot himself right in the eye. And then he brought the dog in to shoot the dog with it.
Nice.
Just anytime we got it at the very onset of the pandemic, so we haven't had a lot of company, but anytime somebody does come in to use the bathroom, you always know whether or not they've used one. Because if they haven't, they're going to. And it is impossible not to let out some kind of noise the first time you use a bidet. And so it's just like the joy of just hearing someone disappear into the bathroom and then hearing whatever squeak, squeal, screech, or scream comes out of the bathroom. It is gold. It is gold. And so today I was just, doing my thing, and just it's funny how something like that'll just send you back and just make you smile, just make you laugh. It's
good laughs.
It is the gift that keeps on giving.
Keeps on giving.
I am so glad for my #bidet.
Okay, awesome. I love it.
Did you already do a gratitude?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Today, I am grateful for my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. Of course, that would be my brother-in-law, right?
Well, it could have been your brother's husband.
Well, true. That's very true. But I don't have a brother that's
where
gay.
Abby forgot that people can be gay.
No, it was just I don't have a gay brother.
Your sister's husband.
My sister's husband, yeah. He is. He's just a really good guy. He's a really good guy. Lots of reasons. He is one of those people in my life that totally gets me, I think, in a way, because he is very similar, where we're both just quiet. We like to have our space. And there's this funny thing that happens when I go to their house, and he's a runner and I'm a runner, and we will be going for a run about the same time. So we're both about to leave the house, and my sister, who is the all-time biggest human connector ever, like, she likes to just, oh, you like this, you should be friends, and gets everybody together, and it usually works. She's always like, oh, you guys are running. You should go together. Like, take Abby over to this trail. And we're both just like, no,
this is my me time.
You don't understand. No, we don't run with other people. Like, no. So we just both look at each other like, you good? I'm good. Okay, peace out. See you later. And then we go and we run opposite directions.
Literal opposite direction. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, great. Nobody's feelings are hurt. It just works. It's funny. And now it's just become this funny thing. Like, yeah, we should run together. No, not really.
Never gonna happen.
Yeah. But no, he's just, I'm obviously, being in a lesbian relationship that's raising a son, I'm constantly looking for positive male role models. And, this is a judgment, but in my world, that's hard to find. And so he's one of those people that just, he's such a good guy, and he's a really good influence on my son. And they have a special kind of bond and connection. And my brother-in-law calls him Little Mash. They got their own little nicknames going.
Oh, that's cute.
And so I'm grateful for a lot of reasons, but that's he's just overall just a really good guy. Happy to have him in my life. Yeah. Most definitely.
Does he listen to this?
He does. Yeah.
I always love it when I express gratitude on the podcast for someone I know is going to hear it.
Yeah.
It's a nice little, I feel like I'm talking directly to that person.
Yeah, exactly. There, do you have this list of people? I know we need to go, but like, when we first started this, there was this list of people in my mind who I thought, oh, they're going to for sure listen to this. And then there's the other list of people where you're like, yeah, they love me, but they're just not, this won't be their thing,
Yes.
He was on the list where I thought he won't listen to this.
How well did those lists hold up to the actual evidence? Were you pretty close in your estimation?
No. It's about 50%
was
off.
I. There are people that I didn't think would even care who listened to every single episode.
Yeah.
And then there were people that I was sure were going to be like, the religious listeners from like even for no other reason than just to like support their friend who's doing it. Who like one of them, I talked to him the other day, and I was like, do you listen at all? And she was like, it's just you guys talking about you guys talking.
That's such an accurate description.
Well, no, that's a description of what it was in the first like 9 episodes. Like what she was really telling me was that that's how far she got when she stopped and never got to the part where we actually talk about real shit instead of debriefing the episode that people still haven't heard.
Except for today, we just debriefed the last 2 episodes.
Did. Yes, and the last one was kind of debriefy, right? But that's like a blast from the past. The last other 30, 40 some odd episodes
have some girth. Yep.
Yeah, so all she was saying was like, I haven't listened to anything but the first few, which is fine. I don't need her to listen. Anyway, I do.
That's
I want
funny.
her to listen.
That's funny.
You know how we review each episode after, like as soon as we're done recording? Mm-hmm. Remember how at the end of last episode, I was like, man, I think that just about wraps us up. We got everything out, and we really tied a bow on. Yeah, I'm tempted to think that about this one.
Right?
But I never know if tomorrow morning someone's going to send me a fucking polo. Like, hey, I got some feedback for you. And then here we are at part 4 next week. I don't know what's going to happen. I have no idea.
Don't expect any outcomes. Like,
no, yeah.
We might have part 4. We might not. It's just going to happen.
This may just branch off into a whole nother podcast. Abby and Ryan talk about speaking their truth.
Still speaking.
Part 17. Okay. Well, until next time, thank you for being there. I said that backwards. Wait. How's it going?
Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. Oh, we're good at this.
We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do, I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. And you can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
Mm-hmm. And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect. What
about the gratitude?
Oh, this one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.